took a long time to come to a realization that when I first heard that one day at a time thing many years ago in any one of the 6 psychiatric institutions I've been in, I thought it was ridiculous. I saw myself at the time as a hip, slick, and cool Sunbelt businessman on the way to great wealth. I was full of plans, and as a matter of fact, I'd made some money as a motivational speaker. Telling people how to take over and control their own lives so they could get everything they wanted, i.e. money, power, fame, sex, and those sorts of things. And so at the core of that teaching that I would give out involved setting goals, making a plan, and working the plan, and having things come true. So you tell me that I need to live one day at a time, and it just went right over my head. I just thought it was absurd. I thought it was dangerously impractical, if not crazy. And now, years later, I've come to realize that it's actually the way life happens. It's not some crazy theory that some drunks came up with. This is reality. Life happens one day at a time. But I had spent much of my life living in the past and future, especially in the days when I first got here. I was very much future-oriented. Completely convinced that my happiness lay in the future from the acquisition of a great deal of money. Money was my other addiction. And they would tell me lack of power is your dilemma. And what I heard was lack of money was my dilemma. And that money would bring the security, the power, the freedom that I thought that was my due. So I had these plans to make a lot of money. I was always hustling up these plans and setting goals and whatever, but I couldn't stay sober. But anyway, it is only in deeper reflection, the realization that somehow that's the way life happens, and that none of us is promised tomorrow. Not a single one of us has got a guarantee that we'll wake up in the morning. So suddenly, over time, it became apparent that this is the day the Lord has made. This is the day in which I am alive, and this is the day in which decisions can be made. Because I can't make a decision in the future. Again, of course, the past is over, right? All I could do about the past was to hate myself for the mistakes I'd made in the past. So it kept coming back to one day at a time, to stay sober just this day, to try to do the right thing just this day. And I had to become beaten into a state of reasonableness before I even was willing to try to live that way. It's a great peaceful joy to live that way. We talk about clearing away the wreckage of the future. That's called worry and anxiety. And that's what I had spent a lot of my time doing. And as I've now come to a state of peace and contentment, I look out at the rest of the world and I see that worry is probably the worst of all addictions in the first world. And we're always, we're just constantly being bombarded with messages on one hand that we should be afraid of this and that we should run out and get this, and then sometime in the future we'll be happy. And so we run and run and run and run, and we run in place looking for some kind of happiness, contentment, peace, in any place other than where it can be found, which is in this day. And so what they told me, and what I understood now with these steps and this process, was that the real problem for me was not so much alcoholism as it was sobriety. That my head was so full of negativity and fear and anger and all sorts of other self-created bullshit that sobriety was intensely painful, and I couldn't stand it. So I had to run back to the drugs and alcohol, even though I began to realize they were killing me. So the fellowship and the program taught me how to find some peace in this day, to find some joy this day. And as I began to be able to do that, the urge to run off and use drugs and alcohol slips away. The things that used to make me very thirsty, as a friend of mine used to say, or says, just don't come up anymore, because I'm evolving. I'm into a different person. But all of the lessons of life can be learned in this one day. And this is I see myself today as a student of life and a servant of God. And so the things that happen each day are my lesson plan for this day, and God is the teacher, and I'm the student, and I realize love is the lesson. But it took a while to grow into that. And of course, I realized that our society lies to us all the time. So I had to stop listening to that cacophony of advertisers and fear mongers and politicians and whatever that were trying to sell me this idea, and begin to learn how to live in this day. And this is the day where I can be useful to people. Matter of fact, it came to me, we talk about, what came to me first, it says, if you just don't drink today, you'll stay sober. And I even had my sponsor at one point say, we'll make a plan. If you feel this crappy tomorrow, then I give you permission to drink tomorrow. But you don't have permission to drink today. And somehow the next day would come by and I hadn't drunk, and whatever it was that was eating my lunch yesterday, well, it just didn't seem to come up. And so the next day I didn't drink, and it, it works. As a matter of fact, I heard it put even more directly. If I don't take a drink today, I will never drink again as long as I live. If I don't drug today, I will never drug again as long as I live, because I can only take a drink and a drug today. I can't drink next week. Next week is an illusion. Today is the day that decisions are made that have life-altering consequences. So I learned to be in this day, and somehow it gets easier and easier. Well, that's the great spiritual teaching of all the great spiritual traditions, that God exists only now. That the only word that accurately describes God is the word is. Everything else is a conjecture. But the is real. But without getting all mystical and about it, what happened to me when I actually began to sincerely engage in this process, that's described on page 24 as self-searching, leveling of pride, and confession of shortcomings. And the big piece is self-searching, the willingness to take my own inventory and stop taking everybody else's. I began to become aware of the fact that there's a voice in my head that was driven by fear and anger, that was constantly judging and despising and putting people down, myself included, constantly worrying and fretting about the future and regretting and feeling guilty about the past, and that voice screamed in my head at about 600 or 700 words a minute, with gusts up to about 1,200. And I could not hear what anybody else was really saying. And I will say to you that none of you is listening to me. A wise man must have pointed this out to me. None of you are listening to me. You're listening to a voice in your head that's editorializing and commenting on what it is that I'm saying. And so what happens is I became more and more involved in this process. I began to realize that the only enemy I actually had was that voice. That there was nothing in the world that was actually out to get me. But that voice was going to kill me. But I was only able to do that when I became willing to begin to accept the idea that this real problem is not so much addiction and alcoholism as it is selfishness and self-centeredness. And what goes along with that is this radical notion that my troubles are basically of my own making. And they arose out of me, and I was an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I didn't think so. But I could only begin to outgrow this when I became willing to accept that idea. This is the acceptance that begins to happen when we try to do a sincere fourth step. Try to look at all of the soap operas that run through the mind and try to get a sense for what's. I was the perfect victim, so I had this long list of resentments of people who had hurt me. Right? And so I'm just the victim, and my life is miserable because of them, whoever them are, whoever they are. And it's not me, it's them. And the book offered me the doorway to a very radical humility, which was the idea that perhaps I had a part in all of this. And it took a while because I was very prideful and arrogant and overly intelligent and able to spew a lot of bullshit and rationalizations that I finally became willing to accept that idea. And in doing a sincere fourth step, I recognized that, and I had these little soap operas going with everybody I resented, see? But there was one central character in every one of these soap operas, and it was me. Okay? And it was a bunch of different people in different times and places, but basically, it was Morgan the Magnificent was right there in the middle of it. And I began to really take a hard look at this and became willing to consider that it might be true. And then, of course, we have to we move into the confession idea, where I had to let go of these secrets. I was living this double life, and I had to actually tell somebody about it. But the real point is that we're doing here is to begin to develop a capacity that separates humans from animals. This is the great mystical and mysterious thing about being human. We are not only human. Trust me. What we have as a human being is the capacity to see ourselves as if from the outside. And that's a capacity most people never develop. They live their lives blaming and complaining and whining about the unfairness of what other people did, and they never actually take a look at themselves. But the question, this is where it gets pretty philosophical and mystical, but this idea of, well, really, I can actually begin to have a sense of what my actions and my attitudes and my words have on other people, as if I was standing across the room watching myself be a jerk, not rationalizing it and excusing it by saying, well, if you had to live with this woman, you'd drink too, that sort of stuff. Put that aside and just see myself and see my own behavior as if standing away, a detached awareness of what's going on within myself. I now realize that's the way God sees me, a detached awareness without an emotional involvement. And so that more and more what we learn to do, and especially in steps 10, 11, and 12, we begin to be continuously aware of what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and why I'm doing it. And somehow that process, the voice in the head calms down. The demons kind of go away because I realize it's foolish to do that. There's a compassion that develops. I began to realize that the things that I wrote in my 4-step that I hated about other people were actually my character defects also. And who am I to put them down for doing the same thing I've done in my past? I don't have the right to do that. I have to valet park my high horse and get down in the world and acknowledge that, I've done the same things I hate them for. So who am I to do that? Who am I to play holier than thou? And so there becomes a growing sense of compassion and understanding that replaces all that terrible judgmental anger. And then all of the bad things that happened in the past lose their power to follow me around and destroy me. Okay? Because if I don't deal with this, these patterns will keep showing up. I moved for years I had no forgiveness or compassion at all. I hated everybody. And so the way I got over one resentment was, somebody else crossed my path, and I hate this guy, and he's here now. So I got over that one. Now I'll hate this guy. And I was just a hateful guy. That's really what it come down to. I had to acknowledge that. But somehow the awareness of that is the doorway out of that problem. Just like the awareness that I'm alcoholic, after I became aware of that, it's not necessary for me to drink anymore. That's pretty radical stuff. So it's self-awareness, the ability to stand outside of ourselves and see ourselves. Not take our own inventory in some critical, hateful way. This is a trap that I urge people to avoid, because my first 4-step, and I've done several, was not so much a moral inventory as a moral indictment. In other words, I listed all of the reasons why somebody ought to take me out and shoot me. It's a terrible, twisted form of self-righteousness. See, and that's the ego playing another game. See, God loves me just as I am. The ego hates me and hates everybody else. So don't get caught in doing an inventory from the standpoint of this terrible, critical, judgmental self turned on yourself. I'm convinced that self-hatred is the worst of all resentments. Resentment is the prime offender. It does bring forth all forms of spiritual disease, but the worst is self-hatred. We have to let ourselves up off the mat, just as we let other people up off the mat, and let some of this stuff go. So, this here and now thing, this here and now awareness allows me to be more and more aware when I have basically gone back to sleep again and my ego has emerged, and I can feel it as agitation. So I become more and more aware of the voice in my head, and when I'm aware of it, it shuts up. If I'm not aware of it, I become the voice, and now I'm making I'm taking inventory and I'm planning somebody else's destruction and so on and so on. So this is the power of prayer meditation. Okay? And but 10, 11, and 12 are where we turn this into a daily practice, a way of being in the world. And we grow into different people. We are reborn. But yeah, here and now is where the action is. And people make a mistake of saying, well, the now is infinitesimal slices of now. They haven't got it yet. That's not true. It's always now. Time and space are going on out there. I'm always at the intersection of here and now. That's the only place I can be. It's the only place God can be, because it's the only place that's real. Now, this is where I'm a mystic, and I recognize that. So this was an awakening from the ego dream, which is what we're all about here, is a spiritual awakening. But the action is right here, right now. This is where it's all happening. Yesterday is over. Tomorrow's never going to happen the way you think it is, so give it up. What are you going to do today? So anyway.
Good stuff.
Oh, by the way, just jump to your other solution. One of your other solutions: sense of humor.
Oh,
Absolutely critical on the spiritual path. I know a lot of holier-than-thou church-going table pounders who have no sense of humor. They are so self-righteous and convinced of their own rightness, and they take themselves and everybody so damn seriously. I like to maintain the phrase divine comedy. That's what we're involved in. We're God's entertainment network, man. He lives in all of us, and this is his show. And a sense of humor makes it a lot easier to get through the day. It makes it a lot easier. And I'm not talking about that Don Rickles kind of humor where I'm telling you everybody else's inventory and what I hate about them in a funny way. I'm talking about the ability to laugh at myself and with you. I don't laugh at you. I laugh with you, and I laugh at myself. And somehow things have a way of working out. I don't know. Well, I don't know what I was thinking. Was it the book tells me I needed to find a power greater in myself that would solve my problem. The power that was greater in myself was always in me and solving the problem for me. I just learned how to cooperate with it. But what I really needed was a higher purpose. The book is right. Selfishness and self-centeredness is the problem. And there are many different addictions other than just alcohol and drugs. And finishing drinking and drugging opens the door to many other addictions, compulsions, and behaviors designed to give me self-gratification and instant pleasure. That's an ego game. But what gives life meaning is to have a purpose higher than myself, something to serve that's greater than my own self-pleasuring, my own hedonism. That's what makes it possible for me these days to go through the tough times. And I've had a few in the last year, and I was in the hospital for a week in Spain with an accident I had there, and I was in a great deal of pain, and I was very angry and frightened, but I knew somehow that it was all going to be all right because I needed to get back here because I have a function to perform that's useful to other people. And that purpose gave me the strength to go through with this. And by the way, going back to that thing about sense of humor, my wife was with me, and we were on this cruise when this happened. God bless her, what an angel. But I remember telling her, I was pretty grumpy about all this. I said, I know that there's going to come a time when I am going to be able to make jokes about this. And when that happens, I know I'll be all right. And I reached that place. And but at the time, as we said, it wasn't a damn thing funny. But it's this realization that I will, in fact, find my way back to a deeper sense of the presence of God. The healing will take place, and I'll be okay. The ego's tendency is to think that if things are, quote, bad today, they're going to be bad forever, so I might as well drink and blow my brains out. Or, conversely, things are cooking today, and everything's coming up sevens, and everything I touch turns to gold, that's going to be that way forever. And I assure you that, too, is going to pass. So I had to get used to the idea that life is cyclical. Tide goes in, tide goes out. And when it's on you, it's on you. This is where prayer and reaching to God, but also reaching out to other people who understand. That's the power of this fellowship, is that we get gut level, emotionally honest with each other. Then we can call somebody and say, hey, man, it's a grind today. Talk to me. And actually talk to somebody at a level I'd never done before. That's how we get through it. And then we come out the other end and we're stronger and better people. But the key is to have a purpose higher, to serve a purpose greater than me. And I had no interest in that when I got here.